lot of kids deal with issues around masculinity. Not all of them go and turn into violent men. What do you think is required in that potion to turn someone that's dealing with an issue of masculinity also to go and actually be violent enough, like a perpetrator, like a school shooter, or even violent?
That's a great question, because when we're talking about school shootings or other kinds of mass violence, there's never one thing that is the cause or the whole explanation. It's always multiple factors that come together. So it's not just people who are struggling with masculinity. And this is where the psychology of the perpetrators comes in. And I've identified different types of perpetrators, and I can go through those 3 types for you just to lay those out. So it's not just that someone can't get a date. Obviously, that doesn't turn someone into a killer. But if someone, for example, is either psychopathic, psychotic, or traumatized, as I'll explain, and you add a lot of social stresses and failures on top of that, and repeated rejections and so on, then you have a potential mixture of factors that could put someone on the path of violence.
Right. And that is actually literally my next question. What are the differences between psychotic, psychopathic, and traumatized? Because for the average Joe, like myself or our average listener, these all sound like people that are suffering from some kind of a mental issue. Maybe traumatized is more clear to most people. It seems that a person have suffered some kind of trauma, whether it's in family or being molested per se. We've seen that in a few school shooters. But really, if you can break it down to a basic level, psychotic versus psychopathic versus traumatized, and can they coexist?
Sure. To answer the last question first, yes, they can coexist. These categories are not mutually exclusive, so you can have someone in more than one category. So let's start with the psychopathic type. People may have some idea of what a psychopath is, or a sociopath. Some people use the terms interchangeably. Some prefer one over the other. I use the term psychopath, and for me, this means someone who is extremely narcissistic. So they live for themselves. They don't really care about other people, so basic empathy is missing. So if they do something wrong or hurt somebody, they don't have guilt or remorse. They often don't respect such things as rules or laws or morality. All of those things put limits on human behavior. They say there's things you're not allowed to do. Psychopaths don't like those limits. They want to be able to do whatever they feel like. Now, some psychopaths are very charming and charismatic. That makes them extra dangerous because they can hide their dark intentions behind a very appealing facade. And that's what a con artist is able to do. So people may not see the warning signs, or if they do see them, they dismiss them because the person seems so wonderful, so charming. Other psychopaths, though, are just chronically abrasive and belligerent. They're combative, and they just leave a trail of broken relationships and wounded people behind them because of their narcissistic entitlement and being so easily enraged when things don't go their way. Some of these people are also just sadistic, so they not only don't care if they hurt people, they may actually seek out and enjoy hurting and killing people. And that's the ultimate expression of their psychopathic traits when they do erupt in a massive attack. So that's... Right.
Can I answer the question before you go to the next one? So do you think in most cases of narcissism, do you think this is something that is, someone can turn into? Or is it a trait that most narcissists just have? Let's say they're born with it. Is that fair to say?
It's a profound question. Nature, nurture, almost anything in psychology can end up in that kind of discussion. Personality or temperament, to a large extent, does seem to be something you're born with. Now, obviously, personality is shaped by our environment. So
it's a combination.
Right. And you have to keep in mind, too, there's a spectrum. Most narcissists are not psychopaths, and even most psychopaths aren't mass killers. So, there's degrees to these things, and it depends what else happens to them in their lives. So a narcissist or a psychopath born in a stable, supportive family may be less likely to become violent than one born into a violent, abusive family. So it's the
Absolutely.
interaction between their inborn personality and then their life circumstances.
Very interesting. And I like your explanation because it really helps put some pieces together for myself, which I've known a few narcissists. And actually, I've had the liberty and the luxury, if you will, to know ones that grew up in very bad environments, and some that didn't. And it really does connect. Of course, none of them ever lived on so far on the end of the spectrum where they wanted to kill people, but most definitely hurt other people and not care about it at all. But before we go completely off tracks here, about the personal stories that I'm knowing, we're turning into the next category, which is psychopathic.
The psychotic.
The psychiatric. So we talked about psychopathic.
Right. So the psychopathic are the narcissistic people. The psychotic categories for people who are really struggling with a major mental illness, such as schizophrenia. And psychotic symptoms generally fall into the two categories of either hallucinations or delusions. And hallucinations are false sensory experiences. Most commonly, that means they hear voices, they hear someone talking to them when there's no one there. But you can have hallucinations with any of the five senses. And delusions are strongly held, rigid beliefs that are not true. And most commonly in this population of school shooters, that's either paranoid delusions, thinking there's conspiracy of some kind to hurt them or kill them, or delusions of grandeur, thinking that they're some sort of exalted being. But there could be other delusions. There was one school shooter who believed he was not really human and from the earth. He was brought here from another planet and placed with his parents. So when you're talking about psychotic symptoms, you're talking about people who are not in touch with reality in some way, whether it's the hallucinations or the delusions.